A lot of the guys who contact me are in their early 20s, and a common problem among these guys is that they might have been passed over by girls in their teenage years, and so they're now in their 20s and they don't really feel like they know what they're doing. Many of them might be virgins, and I wanted to make a video about losing your virginity in your 20s. This was something that I did. I mean, I waited until my wedding night. I'm now divorced, and I had to learn a lot about sex in my 30s, considering I didn't have much in my 20s even after I got married. But I wanted to highlight some of the problems that you might feel and face, and also what you can do about them. And so the situation is that during your teenage years, girls tend to go for a small minority of guys who they find attractive. They tend to also be dating older. So girls tend to lose their virginity younger than most guys, and then the guys they go for are, say, 20% of the guys. And okay, there might be, say, another 40% of guys who may or may not have a stable girlfriend during this time. And then there's like another bottom 30-40% who are getting no attention at all. And I was in that bottom 30-40%. And when it came to trying to establish relationships with very little sexual experience, there were a number of factors I faced. Girls generally don't like being the more experienced one. They usually expect the man to be the experienced one who knows what he's doing. And this is very much shaped by their own experience, because when they were young, they got with a much more experienced guy, and it was her first time, but not his first time. And you're therefore in a perceived deficit compared to the guys that she might have been with in her youth. And also, girls like to feel like they are the nicer, purer, sweeter ones. And if you are taking up that role, it can kind of upset their dynamic. It can upset their fantasy of who is the sexual dominant one and who is the innocent maiden being ravished. You see a lot of those fantasies in romantic literature where the girl is much more innocent, and then there's this millionaire dominant guy. Look at 50 Shades of Grey, the most popular piece of written pornography for women, for example. This is very much what the female fantasy is focused on. So how do we overcome this? Well, in general, you need to decide what you want out of your sex life. What does sex mean to you? I would say it is completely fine if you want to leave sex until marriage. If that is your religious or secular view, however you've come to it, if you want to do it, good for you, go for it. However, it's very important that you meet someone and you only filter for girls who have that same value. And it's not a very common value to have, so you need to be realizing that you're going to be excluding many girls that you might find physically attractive, you might get on with well in terms of personality, but they might not have the same value. They might not think of sex as special and precious as you do. So if you're not in that group and you want to gain sexual experience in order to be able to compensate for this deficit and to be able to occupy that space of being the more experienced one, you're going to have to gain experience within the context of shorter term relationships. And what I found is that many girls, there's maybe not many, but there's certain girls who are willing to get with a less experienced guy that they find very physically attractive and train him. And this is what kind of happened to me. I was with a couple of girls who were more experienced than me, and they taught me about sex, because we already had a friendship of trust and openness. And although they didn't see me as relationship material, they didn't put me on that fantasy pedestal of the more experienced guy that they want to ultimately partner with. They were willing to help me along in my development. And so if you have those kind of friends with benefits, fuck buddy relationships, it's really important to not invest your emotions too much. And that can kind of happen automatically. Because if you came from a point of view of feeling like sex is something very special, and now you're having sex with someone, you're going to feel like your deepest needs are being met and you're being loved really deeply, and that might not necessarily be the case in reality. They might be just going through the motions, but you're not necessarily being loved. If, however, you get into the situation where you are with a girl who is much more experienced than you and you are a virgin or not so experienced, I think it's really important to take steps to try to avoid freaking out. I would say you can be completely open and honest with some girls that you are inexperienced, and they will stick around and they won't lose attraction for you. But in some cases you may not want to do that. You may just want to have the experience, in which case there's plenty of information online about positions and how to go from kissing to sex. And I've made videos on this myself, which I'll try to leave a link in the description for. As I said, you need to decide whether telling them that you're a virgin is something that you really want to do, or that it's something you don't necessarily have to tell them about. In general, people don't have to tell each other about how much sexual experience they've had in the past, unless it's something that could be considered a longer term relationship, or something where it's really important for them both to be fully open and honest. If you decide that you don't want to give an answer, you can kind of obfuscate it by saying something ridiculous like, oh yeah, I've had a girl every night for the past 18 weeks, and you know, I feel like I should settle down with just one for a little while. And she knows you're not being serious, and she knows you're not giving it away, but you don't have to go into the logical truth or lie approach to this. I would also leave a word of warning here though, because it's very easy to get lost if you go down a certain path. We live in a very promiscuous society, and it's kind of easy once you know how. You can use the same words and techniques and locations and habits to get very high numbers of women into bed with you. But as someone who taught pickup and now I'm in a relationship, if I could delete some of the experiences I had, I would. I would rather have fewer comparison data points in my head than to go through life with less satisfaction because my brain occasionally goes to compare. And that's something that's automatic. It's not something that is dependent on how you feel about something. It is just random thoughts generated by the brain at random times. And yes, ultimately I can change my own perspective to enjoy what I have in the here and now, but it's easier to do that when you have less experience. When I was married, I didn't think about anyone else because I didn't have that experience. And when my numbers were low, it was easier to be in this idealistic, in-love environment. I'm not saying it's impossible if you have a higher body count, but it is a lot more difficult. So whatever path you choose, remember that there are pros and cons to everything. I just wanted to provide some information to those making a decision on which path they would choose. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please click like, and please leave a comment if you want to ask any questions, or if you disagree with anything. I'm open to hearing what you think. Thanks very much for listening.